Welcome to the broadcast, my fruits. There's a hussy in the house. There's a hussy in the house! And for once it ain't me. Did you hear? Did you hear the news? Lady Susan resumed official royal duties. Unofficially, you understand. Unofficially. Yes. She represented the Princess Royal at a memorial at the Royal Hospital in Chelsea this week. And she was spotted trotting into a back entrance at the palace. And she was packed in her new role as a superstar of the press at the ripe old age of 82, 83. After going a lifetime totally under the radar, despite her years of royal service and dedication to the Queen, becomes an overnight tabloid raging success story because of this sordid business dragged up by Marlene Headley, otherwise known as Gozi Fulani. That travesty on stilts, that wastrel. Coming out with all sorts of expostulations and utter tripe for the crime of asking her, "Where you from, love? Oh, go on, tell me where you're from. Come on, out with it. Where you from, lovey?" I don't care where she's from. I never want to go there. I never want to visit that place. Because I'm talking about the place she comes from in the annals of her mind. That Headley woman. The annals of her mind that are poisoned by spite. That could besmirch such a delicate, graceful, well-meaning creature in the beautiful winter of her life after a lifetime of service. Denigrated, and seemingly thrown under the bus by Kensington Palace. Now, I'm not naive. I do understand, and said at the time, that Susan Hussey would always be part of the family. A huge part of that royal family. She may as well be a working member because they ain't got many good ones left. And it's slimming down so much, it's anorexic. They've slimmed down that monarchy so much, soon it's going to be all bones. Am I triggering anyone out there? It's going to be all carcass and no meat. I understand. She took the heat at the moment. They have this new way of firefighting any controversy ever so quickly to extinguish the flames that are fanned by the press and mischief makers like Gozi Fulani. Yes, they have their methods. I understand that. I still do not accept that is at all acceptable to put Susan Hussey through the trauma of what she went through. And because she's so gracious, she was then one that ended up offering a formal apology because she's so sweet. Such a sweet damsel. Sweet old fruit. But she didn't even take a second to think about her own dismay, her own grievance. She didn't take a second to think about that. All she wanted to do was try and make amends for the hurt feelings that she had caused. For asking someone where she's from, I ask you, because of her unconscious bias. A family friend whispered to the press, Lady Susan was formally asked to represent the Princess Royal at the service. She was more than happy to do so. This service was for Dame Frances Campbell Preston, did I mention that? And Anne was not able to attend, so she invited Susan. She was more than happy to do so. Her official position was recorded in the order of service, although she didn't appear in the court circulars, has to be said. That's why I'm saying it was official, but unofficially official, if you know what I mean. She was more than happy to do so. It's great to see her back in the royal fold. She will never be out of the royal fold. She is dyed in the wool, part of that family. She is part of the bricks and mortar, or wattle and daub, or whatever it was that so constructed those palace walls, if you'll excuse the expression, my dear. She is part of the bricks and mortar of that palace, before or after the refurb. Because, as I've said before, my dear, this is what you don't understand. Yes, I'm not naive enough to know that the palace were playing the long game and killing with kindness. And killing with kindness is a vastly underrated way to deal with trouble. Vastly underestimated. It was the palace's tactic to kill with kindness. It wasn't Susan Hussey's tactic because she wasn't playing tactically. She was behaving naturally. But you can't extrapolate Susan Hussey from the palace. Not only does her daughter still work there for Camilla as one of her new companions, but everybody loves her. Everybody loves her. It wasn't just a sort of Angela Kelly affair where the Queen has this fond relationship and others in the family, according to Harry and according to whispers, come up against her, let's just put it that way. I've got nothing against the gal, but others might have little brushes of ego with Angela Kelly. Not so with Susan Hussey. She is unanimously loved. Yes, even Harry has spoken himself about his love for her and Meghan's love for her. Even Markle, the Ragland. Yes, even her. Beloved. Honestly, well, we'll move on, won't we? We'll move on, but she deserved more than an apology and peacemaking behind the scenes as far as I'm concerned. For those who are straining to read my t-shirt, because I know some of you will ask, it is the working girl logo from the 80s movie, which is officially my favourite movie of all time. Of course, one can't really have a favourite, can one? Because there's so many good ones. But if I'm ever asked, that's what I say. Got a head for business and a body for sin. Is there anything wrong with that? There's an urgent search for bell ringers. Can you ring the bell? Yes. Ring for the King. That's the official name of this initiative for volunteers. Ring for the King. There are so many avenues that one could traverse, aren't there, in the wake of that title. Ring for the King. The mind boggles at the imagery, but we won't go there. Bats in the belfry, I ask you. Bell ringers! No, not J.R. Moore ringer. Bell ringers, my dear. 8,000 volunteers are needed. There's a lot of talk about volunteers coming up to this coronation. A whole day's going to be devoted to the glory of being a volunteer. And as you know, I do a little bit myself here. A little dib-dab-dob here at the charity shops and also together with the homeless charity in my time. And I've spoken to you before how rewarding it is. And they're using the coronation for the good of everybody, of course. And the hope is that as volunteers come together throughout the nation during the coronation, they'll develop a love for the altruistic joy that you can get from it and the community-minded connections that you can make with people, and that it will be a legacy, a lifelong, reign-long legacy that will continue, inspiring people to volunteer. But they need these bell-ringing volunteers. Do you know there are 38,000 church bells across the nation? And there are 40 to 50,000 bell ringers. It's quite a lot, isn't it, when you think about it, for one tiny little country. 40 to 50,000 bell ringers. And it's quite tricky, I watched a video this morning of someone being educated in the art of bell ringing. And, to begin with, you have 15 hours of training, and it's physical stuff. It's good old workout. And there's quite a lot to it, getting in the rhythm, getting in the vibe. Do any of you ring the bell, my dear? Let me know, Happy Shrove Tuesday to those of you that celebrated with pancakes on Tuesday. In the kingdom, it's Shrove Tuesday, or most people call it Pancake Day, to be honest, my dears. But I hear that abroad it's... What was it? Something to do with Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday. Good names all. But Catherine also celebrated, and she was flipping her pancakes. Wasn't a dab hand at it, had to be said, but she was doing it in public view. This was at a delicious meeting at Oxford House Nursing Home, Slough, where she met with staff and residents. And they watched her make pancakes. She was so lovely and adorable. She learned about their use of cutting-edge interactive technologies to stimulate and enliven the lives of the residents. There was a sensory table, interactive walk, and they're used to support residents with dementia. Of course, it's just a pick-me-up and a tonic to see our future Queen, the Princess of Wales, interacting so beautifully with them. And the images don't do it justice, actually. Go and watch the footage online. It's there on YouTube, on that unofficial The Royal Family channel. And it's lovely to see. It's very natural at ease with them. They're all enchanted and delighted with the gal. It's wonderful. And she wore a beautiful long camel coat by Max & Co., this overcoat. And she was very sleek with the clothing underneath in midnight blue, the clothes and the earrings. And she carried a yellow and white nosegay that had been presented to her. Lovely posing. This story that emerged today, I feel, is going to hit Harry really hard, if he hasn't already been hit hard, because he's taken more criticism from people involved with the army for his words on the head count that was revealed in Spare. And this is a difficult one because we've already had various heads of the army coming forth to say that they thought it was discourteous and ungraceful and not done. Now we have our Defence Secretary, who is really popular. He's even really popular, some would say, across parties. And if he had put himself forward as a candidate at the last leadership election, he could very well, and most likely, perhaps, have been our Prime Minister now. They wanted him, but he is such a family man, he decided he didn't want to run. But there's no counting him out for the future. He's had a lot of involvement with our response to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and he's our Defence Secretary, and he was interviewed about Prince Harry. He told LBC, and he was initially reluctant to go into it, by the way. He knows how these things play out. And I will say I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, to be fair to Harry. Actually, I'll just give you, before I tell you what Ben Wallace said, I will tell you, and I realise that many of you will disagree with me here, but it was not my impression when I read Spare via J.R. Murringer that Harry was being boastful as is being reported. I think it was more nuanced than that, and I do actually feel that he did give fair coverage to a lot of the people that were his comrades, the people that supported him. I think that he was quite graceful in acknowledging all their report. My only issue with that segment was the fact that he revealed the number. I don't necessarily think it was being boastful. I think he wanted to have a candid approach and was just very thoughtless about what the repercussions of that would really, really be. And no, I'm not naive, no, I'm not stupid. I just genuinely don't believe that part of it, that the giving away of the number, was a boast. He said you'd have to ask Prince Harry about the choices he makes, but I think that boasting about tallies, or talking about tallies, I would say talking about tallies, does two things. One, it distorts the fact that the army is a team game and it's a team enterprise. For an infanteer to go over the top, that person is supported by hundreds of people behind them, whether they're in headquarters in Britain, whether they're in the Royal Logistic Corps who helped them get there. It's a team. It's not about who can shoot the most or doesn't shout the most. That's my personal view. And if you start talking about who did what you're actually doing is letting down all those other people, because you're not a better person because you did and they didn't. And that is where I differ slightly for him. I don't think he was trying to raise himself up over other people at the time. I think he gave them due credit. But I do agree with the fact that it's not what you do as part of a team. And, it's against whatever the code is. Comrade code. It's just not done. And anybody will tell you that. It's vulgarity. And it's also dangerous. Not just for him. Not just for the legacy of his children that he harps on about, doing all this to protect them and his wife. He's put them in the most jeopardy out of anybody. More than the royal family ever did. More than they ever did. Just think about that for a moment. He is the one that has put them in mortal jeopardy and has put arrangements for the security of the coronation through the most serious of pains at the moment. But is he going to take the heat and own up to any of that? Oh no, of course not. It's how the press reported it, as he told. Was it Tom Bradby? No, that's how the press reported it. No. It wasn't me. Well, this isn't how the press reported it, Harry. It's what Ben Wallace has inferred for himself and has decided to share with the world, our Defence Secretary. So, suck it up. Meghan's spokespeople have gone to the pains of letting us know that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are not going to be suing the makers of South Park. How gracious. There was a rebuttal, and he told People magazine that these rumours are totally baseless and boring, frankly. Totally baseless and boring. Were you talking about Rachel? Totally baseless and boring. Frankly, nonsense. Nonsense on stilts? Nonsense on stilettos. Oh, that Meg, that sorority girl, that actress, that influencer, or one of you fruits told me recently, that influenza. That influencer, that victim. His Majesty the King has been all kinds of busy. He visited Ukrainian military recruits who are being trained in the United Kingdom by the British Army and international partner forces, and His Majesty was accompanied by the Chief of the General Staff and watched as recruits took part in a defensive training exercise, part of a 35-day course. So far, 10,000 Ukrainians have gone through this training, you know, which teaches them how to survive in a hostile environment and includes weapon handling, marksmanship, fieldcraft, first aid, and law of armed conflict awareness. So busy time for them. And it was wonderful, wasn't it, and heartwarming, especially for you Aotearoa fruits, to see the King greet a gentleman from New Zealand with a traditional greeting. The King also visited the Felix Project, a food redistribution charity, and the poor King had to mingle with the likes of Sadiq Khan, that gnome of a mayor that's been ruining London for the past Lord knows how long. He toured the warehouse and kitchens, and he watched the volunteers preparing and packing meals. And it was quite sad to see him unveiling a plaque inscribed with Their Majesties the King and Queen Consort, because of course our fabulous consort was absent. She's still recovering, but Buckingham Palace said making excellent recovery, so let's hope she'll be back swinging into action. Actually, I think it's today that she might be swinging back into action, but all's well. Oh yes, of course, I forgot my own notes. She has appeared at a Clarence House reception, and I love her. This was to mark the 2nd anniversary of her online book club. And she told assembled authors, and I love it, not afraid to cause a little bit of a stir. She told them, and by the way, this is in relation to, some of you will have heard about this because it's been all over the press. It's been bubbling up. And hopefully it'll mean something to those of you across the pond. I'm not sure how famous the author Roald Dahl is across the pond. Before I go onto this subject, you have to understand, and I know that he is internationally famous, but I don't know how famous across the pond or anywhere else. He is adored here in the kingdom, Roald Dahl. Such a fantastic children's author since, well, not just children's. You might know the Tales of the Unexpected, many things, but it became huge business. Well, of course you know Willy Wonka, all of those guys. Of course you do, my dears. And famously in partnership with Quentin Blake, the illustrator, who is just beyond fabulous. But those books are the books that we cherish, don't we, my dear? Since the 1970s, I think the first kids' books came out. I'm not sure. I think it was the 70s, but just so far. You don't want to mess with them. You do not want to mess with them. And I understand that over the years, he approved of various little tweaks and changes to keep up with the times here and there. Little bit. You know, that is part of the course that happens. We've seen it happen with Enid Blyton and John Dickens Fanny or whatever her characters were. I would love them to remain as they are for all time, but I understand, you know, of course, that to get rid of gollywog and characters like that, which were held with affection, but became controversial. I mean, you can understand some of those things, maybe. I mean, I can't, but the general public accepts these kind of things. But this seems to have crossed the line, this censorship of Roald Dahl's books. Maybe that's too strong a word, because anybody can still go out and buy the old versions of his books, iterations of it up to now. But the recent publishing of his oeuvre, which is coming out, published by, new edition is published by Puffin, with the approval of the Roald Dahl Story Company, which used to be owned by the family of Roald Dahl, but was sold for a vast sum, wasn't it? $500 million, $500 million, I think. Vast sum was sold to Netflix. You're going to be seeing a lot of Roald Dahl's adventures, or what were Roald Dahl's adventures. You know, lots of strands and offshoots and merchandising opportunities, spin-offs from all of his beloved books. They want to get that money's worth, just as they did out of the Harkles. Good old Netflix. But they're publishing these new versions of all his stories, and hundreds of changes were made to the original texts, removing many descriptions relating to weight, mental health, gender, everything that could be seen as construed as mildly controversial. And I'm afraid I can't do justice into what it's done. You'll have to go online and read all the changes they made. Hundreds of changes. And some of them look like small changes. You know, it's just a twist of the word here, a removal of the word here. But when you put it all together as a piece of work, they are the very things that made and makes Roald Dahl so delicious, so fabulous, so inventive. It is the way that he speaks to children as if it's conspiratorial, as if they're one of the grown-ups. The first time that I heard the word, well, I shall say smut, but the other word that has an L instead of an M, the first time I heard that word was in a Roald Dahl book. I think it was in one of his revolting rhymes, something about Cinderella, you dirty smut. Fabulous. Mother knew, she didn't mind in the least. That's an example of the kind of naughtiness that he gets up to. As many of you will have seen, people are described as fat and ugly and wicked, and she's a hag and she's awful, and he's this and that, and they are disparaged for all of their physical characteristics, you know, big nose, big ears, everything, you know, everything you could possibly imagine. Offensive, 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 offensive. But I never knew a single child that was offended. I never knew one that was embarrassed or hurt by it, got their feelings hurt. And if they were, and if I was, by some of the things that he or anybody else said, we learned to deal with it. You know, it was part of the processing of becoming mature and accepting that society and humanity exists on a spectrum from kindness to cruelty. And denying that is denying humanity. And despite the perceived cruelty within these tomes, which was comedic, by the way, comedic, we're not allowed to be funny anymore. The overarching theme of all these books, although there was a dark undertone to them, thank goodness, that's what made them so fabulous, although there was a dark underbelly to most of these tomes, you know, they were about conspiring to murder your gran. I mean, the whole idea of most of his books was offensive, if you're looking for it. But the whole undercurrent I got from it was a feeling of utter love and joy at the adventure of life. It's so revolting and so sad what these people are doing, what these publishers have been either coerced into or are doing themselves because they're so afraid of this cancellation culture or being perceived to be hurting some sort of community. It is so obscene. I'm sorry to get exercise, my dear, but it is obscene what is going on. It is all of George Orwell's premonitions come to pass in the most extraordinarily accurate way. I've digressed quite a lot, but this is just to tell you that Camilla told this Clarence House reception, please remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination. And then she looked up with a smile and said, enough said. I wish she'd said, enough said. But yes, and she received rousing cheers of, hear, 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 Queen Camilla. Yes, remain true to your calling, she said, unimpeded by those who wish to curb your freedoms, your expressions, your imagination. Enough said. It's a direct response to what we've seen this week, because of course she would have been appalled by it like anybody else. Thank God she's not so woke that she's just going to bay to the mob in that way. We hope, we pray. You know, I know that Charles comes in for some criticism from some quarters, not everybody, from some quarters for being perceived as too woke or whatever, but I just thank Marcus, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. And actually, it might have been a lot worse. And I'm not saying that I wish to amend the course of history or keep it as it is either way. But, he might have been a lot... What might be going on now might be in danger of being a lot more woke if we had Queen Diana. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't have been fabulous to have Queen Diana. I mean, imagine the outfits, my dear. Whoosh, sheesh. I mean, I adore Camilla as well, but just the thought of that coronation. Actually, I was getting really excited the other day. Not that I want to bring it on particularly soon, but William's coronation, just to see Catherine. She's going to look so good to have this fabulous model. In a different way from Camilla. Camilla will also look like a shining star, and I'm excited about that too. But Catherine, ooh, it's going to be a biggie. And yes, it's fun to imagine Queen Diana too, but she could have been Queen of the WOKIES as well. She was going in a bit of that direction. So what I'm saying is, I do thank the lucky stars, no matter the criticisms we get. Many heads of state and leaders around the world, and even kings and queens, are becoming a lot more subject to wokeness. Let's just than Charles and Camilla. So I keep some perspective there. As I said, there are hundreds of examples of the words and the phrases that have been omitted and changed. I can't run through them all. There's hundreds. But just a few to give you an example. Mentions of Rudyard Kipling by one of the characters has been replaced by Jane Austen, presumably to be more feminist and less colonial. So no mention of Rudyard Kipling. He's omitted, he's ejected, he's cancelled. The cloud men in James and the Giant Peach are now cloud people. Can't be gender specific there. Chambermaids are now, they are not chambers anymore, they are now cleaners. How unromantic. I think chambermaid is much more preferable. I quite enjoy being that, quite sexy. Cleaners. Actually, I've been told before that cleaners should be referred to as cleaning operatives, or operatives if you want to be right on. So, tut. These are, apparently they're called, what are they? Sensitivity editors, or sensitivity something or other. I can't remember the job title of these people, but it's got sensitivity in the title. It's been put through the filter of sensitivity. Chambermaids are now cleaners. A great flock of ladies. We talked about a tantrum of wedding planners the other day, didn't we, my dear? And you gave me some fabulous suggestions for the collective noun for wedding planners. I've forgotten what they are now, but yes, I'd suggested a flamboyance or a tantrum of wedding planners. I also thought perhaps a confetti of wedding planners could be good. But you gave me some fun examples. Thank you for that. Anyway, a flock of ladies has been changed to a group of ladies. You must be mad, woman has changed to you must be out of your mind. Old hag. Fabulous. You can call me an old hag anytime you like, my dear. Guilty. Old hag has been changed to old crow. That's disparaging crows. Fat. That wonderful word, fat. If I was fat, I would call myself fat. I've told you before about one of my besties. The size of a house she is, and she embraces every single brick. She's fat and she says she's fat. Wonderfully so. Gloriously so. Not large or curvy. Fat. Wonderful word. Well, that's been banned in a million ways over all of these books because Roald Dahl uses it a lot. Some will say he was a deeply unpleasant character in many ways, and he probably was, but so what? Who knows? Maybe Luke and Matthew and Peter and Paul and John and all the apostles, maybe one or two of them weren't exactly nice guys. I mean, who knows? Do you really want to go back over every book you've ever read and check out all this history and whether they all had really beautiful thoughts and perfect families and no prejudices? Every composer you've ever heard, of every pop song, of every album you've ever bought, of any piece of classical music, of any concert you've ever gone to, of the people that developed and mixed the paint for your walls, or put the jewels in your brooches, or taught your kids at school what they said behind the scenes. You're going to go through all of them with a fine-tooth comb. And what about yourself? Are you then going to apply it to yourself? It's just ridiculous. In Matilda, Miss Trunchbull no longer has a great horsey face, just her face. A character who turns quite white no longer is allowed to turn quite white. Now they turn quite pale. Someone who was described as a prisoner is no longer a prisoner, because originally it said she was a prisoner. That word must be too triggering to ex-felons and ex-inmates, because now the expression is not she was a prisoner, it is she was stuck. Can't mention prisons. Fearful ugliness has now become just ugliness. No longer is it fearful. I ask you, what are they doing to these children? And the children will probably grow up never knowing and understanding the harm that's been done to them. Why is it harmful? They're teaching us to be kind to people's feelings. They're teaching us how to be concerned and sensitive to everything in the world. Well, they ain't teaching you much about the School of Life and the University of Hard Knocks, are they, little fruit? They ain't teaching you about real life. They're selling you some weird fantasy. And you better snap yourself out of it, because no one else is going to do it for you. Your generation better snap itself out of it. No mention of double chins is allowed anymore. They've been removed. Well, what about people with double chins? Aren't you disparaging them? Do they not deserve a place in history? People with double chins or triple chins? There are some wonderful people with double chins. Why do you have to remove them? Stop performing this cosmetic surgery on people who have neither asked for it or where it's not warranted or needed. An adorable dress is now a lovely dress. I mean, how did that happen? How was that offensive? An adorable dress has become a lovely dress, changed to lovely. And the word lovely is lovely, but so is adorable. What's wrong with that? Is it too challenging to their intellect of these young ones coming up? Some of them don't speak English well enough, possibly. No wonder. Is that really so challenging for them? Adorable. Why would you want to exchange that word? Why is that your responsibility? How dare you do that to the memory of any author who's presented a work of art that's been published and loved for eons. I'll speak to you all again soon. Thank you very much for dropping by, for your company, and my tip jar is in the description box below if you'd like to treat me. Doodle pip.